Can I remind members that as the committee meetings are held in public session and are recorded, all electronic devices, with the exception of the new committee tablets, interfere with the recording equipment in the committee rooms, even if in silent mode, and advise members and anyone in the public gallery to switch off mobile phones and all other electronic devices. Can I also remind members to declare interest where appropriate? Members, before we get into today's business, can I once again express the committee's extreme concern and disappointment that briefing papers were not received in a timely manner for the departmental briefing on the outcome of the water bill consultation. This briefing was placed on the committee's forward work programme at the department's request back in July, with the consultation completed in mid-September. This comes only 4 weeks after the departmental briefing on strategic drainage infrastructure had to be dropped from the committee's agenda at short notice due to the lateness of papers. Members may wish to call a senior official with responsibility for the water policy to address issues surrounding the production and provision of papers at the next committee meeting, if that's in order. I suppose going forward, members, it doesn't bode well, even if we talk about, in terms of even the car parks this week, we're on a very tight time frame for that. So here's stuff we're talking about since July. Can't afford to get us the papers in time. They're now putting us under pressure to turn something around within 30 days. So I don't think it bodes very well going forward. Steve?
Chair, I would agree. I mean, this isn't unique to this committee, and it has been raised at the chairperson's liaison committee before. So I propose that you raise it at the next meeting. It's not acceptable, so it is really.
Okay. Members, today the committee will receive one briefing, and we will hear from NILGA on unadopted roads and its pilot prioritisation audit in Armagh, Belfast and Craigavon council areas. And there will also be a number of pieces of subordinate legislation to consider at the end of the meeting. In terms of apologies, there have been apologies received from Ross Hussey, John Dallett and Joe Byrne.
No others received.
No others, okay. See, just to update the members, I had the opportunity to attend the Department's bicycle seminar last Thursday. I know a couple of other committee members at some occasions, some parts of the day called in. I have to say the portion I was at actually was more interesting than I thought it would be, albeit it showed cycling in the fair weather and it didn't actually allow for the climate here. So, but it was an interesting seminar, and there was some fairly imaginative ideas in terms of how you could take this particular matter forward and how it's actually helped in other areas. So it was a very interesting day, and for those who got, I'm sure would have found the same. Agenda item number 3, members, the draft minutes for the meeting on the 15th of October. Can I refer members to page 6 in the committee's meeting pack. Can I ask members if it's appropriate to agree and sign these?
Agreed, sure.
Agreed?
Yeah.
Agenda item 4, correspondence. I can refer members to page 11 in the main pack and page 4 in their table papers, and inform members that unless they have any objections or issues to raise, those marked with the suggested approach of to note shall simply be noted. I'll ask the clerk if he wants to go through some of them.
Thanks, Chair. Item 1 is correspondence from the Department regarding the Committee's queries on NIW's annual account and report. Item 2 is correspondence from the Department regarding queries on the A8 road scheme. Item 4 is correspondence from the Department regarding committee queries on air pollution levels in Dungiven. And tabled correspondence, it's a notification from the Department regarding the appointment of the new permanent secretary.
Okay, members, are members content to note items marked accordingly? Great. Okay. So that takes us on the agenda item 5, NILGA's briefing. So if we can refer members to page 28 of their pack. And can I welcome Derek McCallion, Fiona Douglas and Richard Dale. I presume, Derek, you're going to be leading off. So
yes.
If about 10 minutes in terms of the presentation as such.
I would hope we'd be finished before 10 minutes.
That's okay. We'll not fall out of that.
And Chairman, we look forward to presenting you with some factual evidence on other elements that this DRD committee will be dealing with, particularly in regard to off-street car parks, and we'll provide that on time. I welcome the opportunity to pressy the pilot report we've coordinated and distributed, Chair. It allows you as a scrutiny committee to determine both the practical and the political next steps. It's a high-level rather than technical or specific briefing, as befits the Scrutiny Committee and the papers you've already received. Can I just mention at the outset the commitment offered by all those involved? We were directed by the DRD Committee. We have followed through on that diligently, and the commitment for those who are no longer with DRD, including the Road Services, Francis Muskelly, was exemplary in my view. They recognised, Chair, the public interest of this matter and the need to get a thorough, fact-based outcome. Chair, you and everyone in the room will know that you do a pilot for reasons which should be obvious to us all, including the public. You want to get to the root of what the extent of the problem is. You want to get to the bottom of the ways in which you get remedial action. And you want to identify what the costs and the value of the outcome will be. Chair, from my perspective, to my left, my colleague Fiona Douglas, who worked specifically on this as a coordination officer, exclusively on this, and Mr Richard Dale, who's a senior building control officer in Craigavon, have got the detail. So again, in the interest of time, I would defer initially to Fiona to provide some further briefing for your benefit.
Okay.
Thank you, Derek. The presentation that I'm going to give today will focus on an overview of the report that was provided to the committee, looking at the key issues that emerged during the pilot exercise and also the key findings and recommendations from that report. The pilot exercise itself proved much more protracted and resource-intensive than anticipated. There were a number of issues and complexities that emerged during the process. These related to, amongst other things, difficulties with the information sets themselves. There were difficulties in augmenting information sets that were provided by Transport NI, Northern Ireland Water Service, and the information that building control officers brought to the project as well. This proved a long and protracted process. Also, ensuring that all the sites of interest were captured was also had serious resource implications, as it was difficult for the project. It is still difficult for the project team to determine if the lists that we use for the prioritisation audit are a truly accurate representation that the sites that are out there. There were also issues of consistencies in how the building control officers approached the augmentation process. Again, using the original list that Transport NI provided with NI Water Service list, and then the information that came from local government itself. There were also issues that emerged in relation to public safety. Concerns were raised in relation to council's responsibilities and indemnities. Legal advice was sought on this, and it was advised that clearly in respect of abandoned buildings there was a legislative deficit, and this was something that would need to be addressed going forward. There were also issues which caused the process to be further protracted in relation to the development of the assessment criteria itself, and capturing the needs of the three distinct areas involved: the unadopted roads element, the issues in relation to unadopted sewers, and also the public safety concerns. In terms of the results and findings, the pilot process itself...
Just couldn't give it a few minutes, just trying to deal with noise outside.
Sounds like an amicable protest, at least.
Makes a change.
Starting them young. Sorry, I just was actually, at this end, certainly it was difficult to hear. I don't know, but, go ahead, Fiona. Sorry to interrupt you.
Thanks, Chair. In terms then of the results and findings, the pilot itself identified in the region 4 to 5 sites that could potentially be considered as sites of concern for priority-based intervention. And whenever we looked closer at these 4 to 5 sites, it became apparent that one of these sites was already subject to enforcement under Article 11, and another one of these sites, when further analysed, it was evident that there was no requirement for a sewer adoption agreement, as the dwellings connected individually to existing sewers. So you're talking essentially about 3 sites of potential concern for for intervention. So this outcome does provide some assurance that the problem may not be of the scale which the committee anticipated, while at the same time still recognising that this has serious implications for the residents involved. So all of this practical proportionate next steps must be viewed in light of the protracted process required to get to this point, and also in light of the fact that it is evident that these sites are known to Transport NI and Road Service and that appropriate action is being taken. Therefore, the pilot exercise in the 3 council areas demonstrated that significant resource is required from all the participants involved to complete the work, and work which, as has been indicated through this presentation, would be extremely intensive without material consequence. So based on the findings of the pilot exercise, the report recommends that it would be difficult to justify the resource needed to roll out the study to a full audit of all 26 councils, and furthermore, the local government sector in Northern Ireland is currently involved in a wide-scale reform process that will amalgamate the existing 26 councils into 11 new authorities, and in addition to this, the extensive reform programme linked to this of considerable new powers and other powers transferring from central to local government. It is difficult, therefore, to see how, in among all this, a prioritisation audit could be rolled out to 26 councils, and moreover, the scale of the work involved and resource requirements by all parties involved would appear to be such that it utterly outweighs the benefits derived. Thank you.
Chairman, Richard, I would hesitate to say that he's on call, but as someone who did the intensive dedicated work in terms of Craigavon, again, subject to time, I suppose it could be he could be called upon to answer questions if he's able to do so. But again, with your...
No, that's fine. I mean, if Richard wants to make a contribution now, even...
Well, Chair, I would say that, yes, Fiona's explained it very well. It was time-consuming. I say, from my point of view, I would think that a lot of the developers are cute in the way that they approach how they get sewers adopted, whereas they have to apply for their road adoption. The sewer adoption, they can, yes, apply for Article 161, but there's a number of stages before it's actually adopted. And they may be cute in that they don't want to put their bond up front and try to do it at a later date.
Okay.
So, Chair, I mean, to conclude from our perspective, and obviously take questions and comments, it's a very compelling public interest issue. We are under no illusions about the complexity of what is probably a decades-old issue. And we do believe that you can't solve problems from behind a desk. You have to get out there and get it sorted. Clearly, this committee has offered some political leadership and guidance. We're happy to follow through, but it has to be something that is given a thorough, preparatory, anticipatory analysis before we put the foot soldiers out, or other people put the foot soldiers out, because this is an interdepartmental, multi-agency, complex, long-term issue. But we're open to solutions, because that's what we need to be as committed public servants.
I suppose, I mean, I have one question and I'll open it to other members, but I suppose even in terms of what Fiona has said, it would be fair to say that the methodology and the prioritisation criteria actually, in terms of this pilot, has been flawed from the outset.
It has, yes, in terms of augmenting the information sets that we were working with, which as a starting point would have been lists provided by Transport NI, which were then augmented with information lists provided by NI Water Service, and then building control officers taking the information that the local government holds and trying to come up with what is a truly accurate representation of the sites that are out there. That was an extremely difficult process, and Richard may want to talk about that further.
But even on that, but do you think it was deliberate in terms of how it was being misled?
In my experience of the project, there were issues in trying to take this information that was held by the different authorities that held them And whenever we looked then at the end result, the sites that came out as potentially problem sites appeared that there were no issues in relation to sewer adoption agreements. There were sewer adoption agreements in place, and that would therefore beg the question then that are these sites that don't have sewer adoption agreements, is using the information lists from these organisations the correct way of identifying those issues that exist out there?
Do you want to add on to that, Richard?
On the back of that, Chair, I would say, I mean, the information we got from Road Service, where you had one road adoption bond in place, but you could have 4 or 5 applications to Northern Ireland Water for different parts of that actual road. You know, and one part of the sewer may be adopted, and then the next few remain unadopted. You know, so it's the whole gambit. Just it wasn't easy to take road service information, water service information, and then obviously the applications we have and coordinate it all.
Deputy Chair.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. You stated in your executive summary that the outcome provides assurances that the problem was by no means of the scale that the Committee for Regional Development had anticipated. And you had, during our inquiry, you came here, I think it was in January 2012. At that time, had you anticipated the scale of the problem?
Could I just point out as well, just to caveat that point that was made in the report as well, that it must be considered in light of the fact that the project team would still have difficulty in standing over the information that the lists, you know, that were subject, and sites that were subject to the assessment criteria, if they were truly inaccurate representation of the sites that do exist. So just to caveat that point in relation to that outcome, and Derek may want to pick up on Nilga's position.
Well, the short answer to that question is no. What we were presented with was a suite of extensive information, but information has to be turned into knowledge, and the difficulty of looking at that information has been more eloquently put by Richard and Fiona. But the short answer to your question is that there was no means to forecast the extent of the problem.
David?
Thank you, Chairman, and you're very, very welcome. I think I'd like to have it recorded that this is a very worthwhile piece of work, and it's obvious we're going to come back to it, so we need to keep a hold of it. There's just a couple of points. I see the dates that you're giving. Will the exercise, when it takes legs again, be transferred to the super councils?
I think ultimately, whilst we would take direction from this committee who sought the work in the first place, is if it's moving to another phase and a more thorough and complete phase, it could only, in a practical sense, be determined in terms of the local government side by the 11 councils. And it is highly important that the resources at the moment are deployed in transformation and transition, that the right time is chosen for utilising those officers who could be involved in any further phase, Chair. I hope that's answered the question.
Is that you agreeing with me that it is important, therefore, that the Armagh, for example, becomes a different council in that respect, so it's Craigavon, and that we really would be better moving it into that area, which is a wider area, so that we can come back to it?
Yes, and there's no questioning that the local information at street, district electoral level is going to be available, whether it's 2611 or any other number. But yes, the short answer to the question is I am agreeing, Chair.
Just one other point, if I may. You say legal advice on abandoned building sites, so, and there is a legislative deficit. Well, I respect that, but as a committee driving this along with yourselves, can we be told what that deficit is in clear terms? And just sort of drilling underneath that, has the question of NAMA sites or the new investors' interests being addressed in your work? Because that seems to be something that I, and I'm sure other members are coming up with, is this whole secrecy about NAMA, who's got NAMA or what they are?
Okay. To take those sequentially, Richard would like to deal with the point about the legislative deficit and what it is.
Yeah, sure. From our point of view, whenever we went out to inspect these sites, our concern was that if there was something wasn't in place with regard to health and safety, and we were the last people that were there, and we didn't report that to the health and safety executive or to the builder, were we drawn any liability onto the council? We did consult with the health and safety executive, who advised us that it's their responsibility to chase up health and safety issues on building sites. However, they do come into difficulties if the site is lying dormant, and the longer the site has been lying dormant, the more difficult it becomes for them to actually take any prosecutions or against the named developer or the member states it could be in NAMA. So that just, it was a grey area for them too. If the site is working and somebody's on it, they have no problem issuing enforcement notices, etc. But when the site is dormant, then it becomes exceedingly, progressively difficult for them to actually find out who owns it and then actually get them to do anything.
Is that the extent of the deficit you're talking about, Pat? Or
Yep.
is that's right? That's the total extent? I mean, I'm just curious on how you're calling that one, because given that there is a variance in terms of different sites, I'm just curious of how the terminology used probably more is my problem with that one.
Okay, this was a legislative deficit that was identified in particular relation to public safety on site, and whenever, as Richard had mentioned, building control officers were out on sites assessing them for the purpose of this prioritisation audit, and having been then the last person on site, and if subsequently someone were to gain access to that site and then injure themselves, then what the liability would be on councils in relation to that injury that had taken place. And we sought legal advice from a local government legal advisor who did identify that it was a grey area, and to address the fact that we had concerns in the event that something would happen, we engaged with the health and safety executive as well to get their advice on the matter as well. And it was something that we, through the report, came to the conclusion, and through the advice that we were given, that there was a legislative deficit in relation to abandoned building sites and public safety issues, and whose responsibility it was to make that site safe.
And whose responsibility is it?
This is the problem, that it is a grey area, because health and safety executives' obligations relate specifically to sites that are working sites.
Well, I appreciate you flagging that up, but I just find it just isn't satisfactory, with all due respect, that we leave it hanging up in the air. There's a grey area. But we don't know whose responsibility, but there's a legislative deficit.
Well, it's something that we identified in our report.
Oh, I appreciate that you've identified it.
And
my concern in hearing what you're saying is that your concerns might have been, probably are, about you being the last person to turn the lights out on leaving a site. My concern is, after you, there could be children in there,
yeah, that was one of
their dogs, could be anybody. And so where do they stand?
That was one of the major concerns that we had as well, the danger to the general public in relation to gaining access to that site, particularly children. And
do you think then that I don't know where you got this from, but whoever has given you the authority to pick up on what they've said and for you to repeat it, that there's a legislative deficit, that it might be worthwhile going back to them and saying, well, I hear what you say, but we need a better explanation. Because I think the committee could
Chair,
do better with a better explanation.
I would agree with that. I do agree with that. I also wanted to pick up on what the Chair said, which I think was in the same strain, which is that terminology is important. Members of this committee will know that a lot of public servants deal with risk and assessment of risk. The short answer to the question is that we've repeated the question and somebody needs to pay for a clarification of that legal advice, because at the moment, and as we found out, and in a heated discussion after this came to light, the very point that the member has raised exercises us as well. We need to get to the bottom of this, because identifying a problem isn't solving it.
One of the things that strikes me about it is, but you have been engaged to do this piece of work. So in essence, you have a paymaster as well. So I really think, given you have been engaged, I think as well as part of the report, also identifying something, you should have been actually maybe being part of the solution as well, and saying what should actually be happening. So I really think it's between yourselves and your paymasters in terms of being engaged to do this piece of work to come up with a solution, because as David said, you know, I personally don't like the terminology, this legislative deficit, because really what that's saying to us, this grey, and I mean, Fiona, you called it a grey area. There's people, so you've now identified a problem, there's people actually been left vulnerable, but no one has actually decided to act or make a suggestion on how to get a solution for this issue.
Chair,
I wonder,
just...
could we...
Sorry, David. Let Fiona speak first and I'll call you back.
Chair, can I just mention that throughout this process we did engage with the Health and Safety Executive, and those sites that we identified that were of particular concern in relation to health and safety for the public, we put in place a process whereby the Health and Safety Executive went out and assessed those sites, and in doing so they also did follow-up work with the developers who was responsible then for those sites. So we were proactive in terms of, we'd identified that there were particular sites that could pose risk in terms of public safety, and we ensured that steps were then taken and followed to make those sites safe, having identified them.
So you're now saying the sites are safe?
Well, in terms of the Health and Safety Executive, their involvement, they at the point of writing the report, they were engaged in that process of taking the steps then where they were resourced to do so, to encourage the developer then to take necessary steps to make sites safe.
But let's cut around this wee bit, Fiona. I mean, we are all familiar. There's a lot. I mean, so you have only a small number in terms of the pilot scheme. There's a large number of sites in Northern Ireland. There's a large number of the sites where developers have walked away. So we have a situation where developers can't even be identified at this stage, nor, even if they could be identified, couldn't be made to do anything because they're not in a financial position.
This is our experience, Chair.
So in terms of the pilot, what number of sites are we talking about? And then going forward, are you satisfied all those sites are now secured?
In terms of the pilot, there was in and around 11 sites. That, I mean, it's something that I would need to go back
and how many check. In terms of your legislative deficit are we talking about of the 11?
It's something that I would need to go back and
approximately,
check.
I'll not hold you to it, honestly.
Approximately in relation to the legislative deficit applies where the site has been completely abandoned. I would say maybe in about 4 or 5.
And how many of those now are left in a state where we shouldn't be concerned about?
The Health and Safety Executive engaged with Richard and the representative from Armagh and the representative from Belfast in relation to those particular sites. Again, it's something I would need to go and look into further for you, but there was engagement where Health and Safety Executive went out to those sites to check the sites and to assess them, and there's actually at the appendix of that report a Health and Safety Executive report of that exercise, Chair.
One final one. What strikes me and concerns me is, back to the pilot, you have a paymaster, you've identified a problem. I'm concerned we're still sitting today, there's actually a problem. With those sites, there's all other sites that the general principle will still stand, and I think that's something that has to be dealt with. But And I know you've sought legal advice on this one, Derek, but I would have concerns in terms of actually leaving vacant sites if we haven't actually got a conclusion in terms of how that's been resolved. David, sorry to cut across you.
Yeah, that's quite all right. As I said, I appreciate the report advancing this potential problem, calling it a problem of a legislative deficit. You'll have to appreciate, as part of our job, when someone on this committee like me or anybody else sees that, they say, well, what the hell, what's this? I'm going to say you haven't thoroughly explained it. I'm disappointed in that respect. But I understand your reasons in terms of how you can't actually come to a conclusion on it. And I'm just wondering, Chairman, whether or not it would be of any help to Derek and his team that we actually look to apportion responsibility on this on a wider net and ask the department to pay for this information. I think this really needs to be dragged out because of, and quite recently, Derek would know it well, in a site in Cumber, I literally had to pull a young girl out of a manhole. And that's just through sheer neglect. And then you hear, oh no, everything's sorted out, everything's fixed. Quite, maybe, to use that term, it seems to be bandied about, everything's stick and plaster over it, but it's not fixed. And I'm just wondering whether or not we could help in this. I'd like to see if we could help to put additional pressure on someone to, if it's a question of paying for some further work.
Well, I think at the conclusion of this, David, we could discuss that and talk about how we take that forward, if that's
All right, yeah, happy enough.
My colleague Richard has just pointed out the importance of HSE on this because, you know, identifying a problem is only part of it. It's not the solution, but an enforcement and an aggressive stance on this with regard to abandoned sites would help everyone, particularly those who may be accidentally or otherwise on the sites and having to be pulled out of lakes.
When once we finish this particular part
I
of the
understand
session,
your process.
We'll take that one forward, yeah. Stephen?
Yeah.
NAMA?
Sorry.
I asked the question about, sorry, Stephen.
You're right, okay.
Yeah.
The
My,
NAMA and or the
I'm sorry to say that NAMA wasn't part of the brief. The reason I say sorry because I know that in terms of public interest, it's massive. But it's my understanding that the brief was very two-dimensional rather than pick up the very correct point made by the member regarding the implications of NAMA sites.
Well, I think that's something we could tie in, David, to your earlier point. Stephen?
Thank you, and you're very welcome. I just want a wee bit of clarity around the HSE and their role. Are you saying the HSE went beyond their remit in the case of the sites that you had to go out and secure them afterwards?
Can I just defer to Richard in terms of utilising HSE?
Right, okay. Just a wee bit unclear as to their role.
Sure. The sites that we were concerned about for health and safety for reasons of protective fencing, etc., not in place. We did pass on to HSE, and two of their members met with myself in Craigavon, with my colleague in Armagh and in Belfast as well. We provided them with the details of the developer, and they took photographs and pointed out what they believed needed to be put in place. And then they were to chase that up from an HSE point of view, but they actually didn't feed back to us as to what, if the work was done, or half of it was done, or none of it was done. But they did explain that they would have difficulties if the developer's still there. Yes, they can do something if it's gone into NAMA or it's been repossessed by a bank or whatever, that they did have difficulties the longer that.
So while the developer's there, they have a role, but once the developer's gone,
That's where
that's
there's
them finished, really, that's okay, right, okay,
Thank you,
Chair,
Stephen.
that's right.
Daniel?
Thank you, Chair. I note that one of the challenges you faced, that there was the alignment of the different information sets from the organisations very difficult. Was there more that DRD or any of the stakeholder groups involved could have done to make it easier for you?
Okay, my overview of this is that it's an excellent situation when you have seamless, consistent, integrated information. It currently doesn't exist. It would require more resource to translate and bring all that information out. Can that information be integrated? Yes, it can. An example would be the ACORN system of data classification that bodies like Sainsbury's use, Chair. But at that particular point, the information we got, time and cost, that's all it was. It probably could have been, and that's why we say in terms of learning from the pilot, through you, Chair, that if we ask for that information in a different way, if we ask for that information to be linked to GIS, etc., then there would be internal work required to get that done. But when you're on a task and finish, you know, there's a limit, and we identified vastly more problems, as your colleague member raised, than was initially foreseen. Could have been better.
And Chair, just follow on. I note in your conclusion recommendation you made reference to the governance model of NI Water as being causing some difficulties. Could you just elaborate on that there?
Any point?
Sorry, could you?
The change in legislative requirements pre-2007 posted linked to the formation of NI Water as a government company in 2007.
That relates to the situation that arose that the requirement for a sewer adoption agreement was a mandatory obligation, and when the 2006 legislation came in and NI Water came into being, that process stopped from being mandatory and caused issues then in relation to developers and sewer adoption agreements. And just to flag up that there are legislative proposals currently out in relation to the making sewer adoption agreements a prerequisite of connection to the public sewerage systems, meaning then that no private sewerage system could be connected to the public sewerage network without the developer entering into a sewer adoption agreement. There's further proposals as well contained within that consultation, and it would appear that these proposals have been brought forward in order to address that situation that arose where the sewer adoption agreement went from being mandatory to being voluntary.
Can I just ask a question?
We're actually straying into an area of, in terms of the papers we actually haven't got, that refer to part of the presentation that NI Water should have been doing.
It would have been part of the consultation.
Someone
was
pick
on
up
the
NI
water
Water,
bill.
perhaps? Yeah.
But I actually think it's an interesting point, and I think we should really come back to that one, if that's okay.
Chair, can I also, for the record, say that we had the cooperation we received from Northern Ireland Water also included, we invited them to attend. They couldn't make it today because obviously it's a distinct set of issues and rightly raised by the member.
And I think, again, that's something else we need to follow up on, and it's useful in terms of you flagging that one up as well, Fiona. I think if all members are content, then can I thank you for coming along today, and we'll maybe discuss further on some of the points that David's raised and see how we can assist you in trying to address some of these matters. Thank you.
Sure, it's a public interest issue. We have our sleeves rolled up. We're ready to provide solutions in partnership, and can I thank you all for constructive criticism.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you. David, I'll let you kick off then.
But just basically what I said, can we pick this up now? They've done their report within their, obviously, the finance that they had.
Yeah.
It's when they put something down like there's a legislative deficit, alarm bells, go. But they've explained what basically what it is, and that is that they really don't have the money to take that bit up and develop it. So I think, can we ask the department,
Well, I think
would they finance them to finish this wee bit of work here so we know what their figure
it's
is?
a bit like Richard's answer in terms of they're the last person on site.
Yeah, well,
Well, now our fingerprints are in this as well, so I feel that we have a duty actually to take it forward, because it's been flagged up. So, I mean, If the clerk can maybe write to the department in relation to that.
We can write to the department, yes, if members are content that we write also to HSE.
The other thing I'm tying in, even with the same point, and I think it was Stephen, or maybe it was Dave as well, the pilot didn't include NAMA sites. So just because they're in the possession of NAMA doesn't mean that there's not a responsibility on us to actually deal with those as well.
The pilot might have included NAMA sites. It's identifying what a NAMA site is.
Yeah, there's that to it too, yes.
And it's about time that somebody, it would probably need to be DFP, but even for us to do our constituency work, it's about time we were told what's a NAMA site, what, or who has bought this NAMA site, who the number of investors have taken over NAMA. I mean, NAMA's nearly disposed of in that sense. So I think it's about time for us to do this work, that we had some clear guidance as to where all the NAMA stuff has gone.
I suppose that's a slightly different thing, but I mean, I think the general issue is about sites and the unsafe nature, and in their words, the legislative deficit. So, do you want to come in?
Just on the member's query with regards to NAMA sites, I mean, during the course of the inquiry, we did write to NAMA on 2 occasions, asking if they would identify sites in Northern Ireland where they held bonds. And on both occasions they came back with a no response, that they didn't. But I go back through those papers again to see what else we have in respect of NAMA.
Not to dwell on it, but as far as I know, the greater number of NAMA sites have been flogged off to an American investment company. But we're all left in the lurch, going back to safety. You know, how do you trace, if something goes wrong on a site, how do you trace?
I think that's where we get back in terms of writing to the department to find out the responsibility, because as it's been flagged, let them come up with the solutions as opposed to us.
Chair, thanks for letting back in again there. The inquiry started ahead of my time here, but certainly it was here whenever we released the findings of the inquiry. And it obviously came about because we know in our constituency this is a big, big issue. But I'm disappointed to hear today because, you know, you're finding that these people set out to do this here and they're coming across these hurdles, you know, about information sets, public safety issues, indemnity and all, and various other issues. I think that as a committee we should certainly be pressing the department to try and clear those hurdles for them, to try and really get to the bottom of this, you know.
Or should we actually bring some of the department in relation to that part, actually bring them up for a bit of a chat?
Yes, definitely, because major issues have been raised there. Because this inquiry was set up for the right reason. This is this was coming from the grassroots. We all know what they're like in our own.
It doesn't seem as it's been well thought out in terms
I'd support Declan. I mean, that was, I don't want to say it was pretty amateurish, that stuff there, but I would support Declan on that, providing we do the 2 things. In other words, you know, not have a bunch of arrogant so-and-sos sitting up there dictating to us. We have something in writing from the department officially so that we know what they're saying.
But whilst that was amateurish, in your words, David, if you actually start to dive into it, their remit was fairly narrow. I mean, she did say that the methodology used in terms of what they got was flawed as well. So I think that is an opportunity. I mean,
I'm not criticising it from that.
No, I understand you're not. No, I appreciate you're not. I think, and that's why I'm trying to say, to support them, given the methodology used and what they had to work with, and actually give them a very limited scope in what they could come back with also. So, and there might be a reason for that as well. So I think it may be useful to bring the department up. And I'll take Declan's point. We'll get we'll write off as well and try and get some steer first. Yeah. Is that okay? Agenda item number 6, members, was the briefing into the outcome of the water bill consultation. So as we already know that they haven't had the papers here in time, but even today has brought up some issues maybe surrounding that. And we'll have an opportunity. I know you wanted to raise it there, but we'll have the opportunity if and whenever they decide to actually send us the papers. So. Agenda item number 7, an SL1 for the Lat Road Jarrett Pass Newry abandonment order in Northern Ireland 2014. Can I refer members to page 72 of the pack, and can inform members that the department have consulted with the relevant stakeholders in relation to this. No issues or concerns have been raised. Can I ask if members are content with the merits of the policy proposal? Okay. Agenda item number 8, SL1, the A21 Ballygowan Road, Saintfield, abandonment order, Northern Ireland 2014. And can I refer members to page 5 of their tabled packs? Can I inform members that the Department have consulted with the relevant stakeholders in relation to this? No issues or concerns have been raised. Can I ask if members are content with the merits of the policy proposal? Agreed. Agenda item number 9, subordinate legislation not subject to assembly procedure. Can I refer members to page 77 of the pack and page 10 of their table papers? Can I ask members to note that the waiting restrictions Larne Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2014, the parking and waiting restrictions 5 Mile Town Order Northern Ireland 2014, the parking places on roads Lurgan Amendment Order Northern Ireland 2014. So, as I've said, member, those are only to note. Agenda item 10, SR 2014-257, the A4 Sligo Road Belcoo Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2014. Can I refer members to page 81 of their pack? Members, the committee considered this SL1 at its meeting on the 10th of September and no issues were raised. The order has subsequently appeared without comment in the Examiner of Statutory Rules, which can be found in the table papers. So if we put the question that the Committee for Regional Development has considered SR 2014-257, the A4 Sligo Road Belcoo Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2014, and have no objection to the rule. Agreed? Agenda item 11, SR 2014-258, the Dromala Park Carnlough Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2014. I refer members to page 88 of their packs. The committee considered this SL1 at its meeting on the 10th of September 2014 and no issues were raised. The order has subsequently appeared without comment in the Examiner of Statutory Rules report. Can put the question that the Committee for Regional Development has considered SR 2014-258, the Dromala Park Carnlough Abandonment Order Northern Ireland 2014, and has no objection to the rule. Great. Agenda item number 12 is any other business. And for those members who weren't here at the start, David did raise maybe if we could have a brief discussion in terms of the car park. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, the off-street car park. And we're going to do that in closed session if that's okay, members. Agreed?
21.